So, AI tools, what's the deal with them, right? You've got ChatGPT, MidJourney, Stable Diffusion, like, everybody's got a name that sounds like a fancy coffee order. Yeah, I'll take a ChatGPT 4, half cap, oat milk, extra creative. So today on the AI Creative Podcast, we're breaking it all down. The tools, the trends, the ones that work, the ones that don't. And by the end of this, you'll know if you're living in a sci-fi movie or just talking to Claude in your garage.
Welcome to Fuse, the AI Creative Podcast, where we explore the intersection of AI and creativity with your hosts, Rob and Jason.
All right, friends, welcome to today's episode of Fuse, the AI Creative Podcast. We're your hosts, Rob and Jason. And man, Jason, we got a packed episode today. This is going to be a fun one.
Yeah, man, this one is packed to the gills because we're talking about our favorite AI tools. And who doesn't love to talk about their favorite AI tools? Speaking of those AI tools, that intro that I heard there, something about that sounded kind of familiar, maybe looked a little familiar. Can you say anything about what we heard up there at the beginning?
Yeah, so that was made with a bunch of AI tools. The little stand-up sketch was 100% generated with the AI tools we're going to talk about today.
And those tools are going to come up in our list because we both use those tools quite a bit, and they are definitely among our favorites. So I can't wait to jump in and banter with you about our favorite tools.
Yeah, man, this is going to be a fun episode because one, we're both nerds, but then two, we're in a season of so much new stuff dropping all the time that even when you're in it as much as we are, you just can't keep up with all the stuff. Literally, as we were prepping for this episode, we log into ChatGPT and it's like, O3 Mini has launched. So I got a brand new model to play with there too, which in my 42 seconds of playing with it seems promising.
Yeah, I had it write a little show intro for us that we didn't use for this show, but I was really impressed. It almost sounded human. I mean, I'm not going to say it did, but it was pretty darn close to real. I'll tell you, as I travel around and do trainings, I have not seen this much enthusiasm about AI in the last couple of years that I've been talking about it. Everybody wants to think about how do you use these tools. I do a lot of work in the church world, and I'm seeing a lot of pastors and leaders engage, but you and I are both in a group of AI entrepreneurs, and there's just high enthusiasm now. So it's exciting. I also think about the fact that we're in a new year. We've got a new administration, all new possibilities for AI. Some of the regulations and things that were clamped down seem to be opening up. So I don't know exactly what that means. That could be a double-edged sword, but it seems like
it's either innovation or Skynet come after us. One or the other.
It's one or two. Sometimes I feel like we're living in the prequel to the Terminator, but and you know, AGI, artificial general intelligence, it's a buzzword that we're hearing about in the news all the time. I've been hearing that it could be here by the end of the year or sometime next year. We'll see if that happens.
I think in order for that to happen, though, we're going to have to actually define what it is. And so that's going to be a challenge, I think, all in itself is agreeing on what AGI actually is.
Right, because some people are claiming that operator, which you said you played with already, is AGI. And boy, if it's AGI, it's a funky version of AGI. I think I heard you or somebody else say it takes you 4 times to do what you could do as a human.
Yeah, no, I had to try to do my expense reports, and I had to try to do some basic looking for podcast opportunities and putting it into a spreadsheet. The way that I describe it, it's like my grandma is trying to do the task and she doesn't know how to use a computer, and she's also inebriated while she's trying to do it. So what would take me 30 seconds took it about 15 minutes, and it did it maybe with 30% accuracy. So it is not, if that's AGI, I don't want it.
Yes. Normally we say this is the worst it's ever going to be. It's pretty bad right now, but you can see where we might be, you know, in 6 or 8 months or even by the end of the year. I was telling someone on an earlier call today that I can foresee a time where maybe even by the end of the year, I can tell it I'm going on a trip and it'll book my hotel and my flight and my car and all of that without me having to watch every step of it.
Yeah, also, it's like a research preview for a reason. So it's like, you know, we got to temper our expectations. But one of the things that we want to try to avoid on this show is the hype that comes along with it. And man, it's just like grinded my gears how much hype it got. I'm like, none of these people have pro accounts, so they're not even trying it. They just see what
Yes.
a little demo. I'm like, no, just go actually try it and then talk about it. Don't hype it up, because anybody who does use it is going to be sorely disappointed.
Yeah, I saw several different experiments. And then I saw those theoretical people that were saying, here's 5 things that you can do now with Operator. And it's like, you really can't.
Yeah, and the pace of things that are dropping is a boon for the industry as a whole, because it shows that things are developing. There's demand for it. These things will become more mature, and then once they do mature, I wish hopefully this life cycle of innovation that happens in this space will be like tomorrow.
Yeah.
We're going to be able to do all sorts of new cool stuff.
Well,
But let's dive into some tools and talk about our favorite tools, what we actually use day to day, and some different categories.
What do we want to talk about first?
Yeah, so we're going to go through a bunch of different categories of AI tools that we use here, and we're going to start with LLMs, which are large language models, also known as the chatbots. And when it comes to chatbots, so many options out there. I think that a lot of people are like, where do I start? Jason, if you were answering that question, where would you start? What do you use on a daily basis?
Well, it's not super flashy or probably the most hip answer, but I am still pretty committed to ChatGPT. I do have subscriptions to ChatGPT and to Claude, but I still find myself gravitating toward ChatGPT. It's a great, if you can spend the $20 a month for the Plus account, it is definitely still the go-to for me. And now this O3 model that we just experienced, I'm even more excited to play with it and see what it can do.
Yeah, I tell people that the $20 a month that you would invest in a ChatGPT subscription is the best investment in software history. Like the what you get for $20 is unreal, and it will easily 10x, 100x your investment if you use it.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, while it's not my favorite generator, DALL-E is connected to it. And if you've ever bought a stock photo, you know that a stock photo costs somewhere in the neighborhood of like 25 or 35 bucks. So if you generate one image that's going to be spelled wrong and look like it was generated by AI, that's going to get better too. So the $20 is definitely worth it.
Yeah, but I mean, speaking of pricing, it's worth mentioning that you tried a pro subscription. I've got a pro subscription. I kept it. You didn't keep it. And let's kind of like dive into what that means and maybe explore why I've got it, why you decided to pass on it. Out of the box, if you're going to use a free account, paid account, whatever, you can use the basic model. As you go up in the subscriptions, you get more usage and new models. Jason alluded to DALL-E, which makes images. What sells ChatGPT for me is the product itself. It's the things built around the model that make it a tool for actually getting things done. Like you can create a custom GPT, which is like your own little chatbot with its own instructions, and you can give it tools to access things that are outside the model. For example, post to Instagram straight from ChatGPT if you want to code that. You can write and run code in a ChatGPT and do some complex analysis, crunch docs and things like that. They just launched, the Canvas feature, which opens up like a drawer on the side and has a little document editor. All that comes with the Plus subscription. Also in Plus, you now have access to Sora at a limited rate. But then on the Pro subscription, you get massively increased usage limits. You get Pro mode, which is like really careful reasoning. You get unlimited use of Sora, the video model, and some other perks too. So you get access to Operator, which can control a browser and do things for you, which is completely worthless at this point, but it's coming up into something that is cool. So I think we both tried it around the same time. I upgraded, and I'm hanging on to it because one, I'm a nerd and I want to play with things like Operator the moment they drop. But then two, like I actually found some good use of Sora as a video generator, produced an entire short film, which by the way, just found out this morning, got an honorable mention in the AI film competition that I entered it into. So having that suite of tools and then also that unlimited usage there was really compelling for me. But you tried it and it wasn't your cup of tea.
Well, I did find that the more sophisticated version of O1 gave me some great output. So I liked what it was doing. But I did find that Sora, for me, at least with what I was trying to generate, there were so many restrictions. I mean, they don't like when you bring in photos if they don't know the person, or I was trying to generate something even on MLK Day. I wanted to create a painting that was emerging. And every time I'd upload a picture of MLK, it wouldn't allow me to generate. It would change the likeness. So I just found that at least for right now, the fact that it's as locked down as it is made it, when I go over to Kling or even Runway, I'm able to achieve what's in my head, especially if it includes photos and stuff like that.
Yeah.
$200 a month was a little pricey for the amount that I was able to, for what I was able to get out of it. I did get a couple of shots that I used in a trailer, but wasn't worth it for me quite yet.
Yeah, and we'll talk a lot more about the video component once we get down there. But right now, looking at the LLM piece, I would agree. I think as an LLM, language model, chatbot, whatever you want to call it, if you've got that plus account where you've got the kind of the paid tier of basic access to all the different models, you don't need to run 1,000 queries on something like O1, which is the advanced reasoning model. That $20 account is more than enough for 98% of people, if not 99, 100%. I just keep it because I'm a nerd and want to have that. I want to feel like I'm special and have that access.
Well, and I can see a time where if I have a project coming up that I know I'm going to need to generate a lot of video, I might subscribe for a month. I do like that you can turn it on and off. It didn't take anything for me to just go back to the $20 a month plan. And if I want to, I think it even prorates it. So I think it only charged me $180 that month. We'll see. I may come back. They may win me back over.
Yeah. And we'll talk about the video piece here in a little bit, but I think it's worth an honorable mention because ChatGPT, it might be the OG, but it's not the only one on the scene. What are your thoughts on Claude?
Well, as you know, because you wrote the foreword, I did write a book, AI in the Church, a clear guide for the curious and the courageous. I used ChatGPT and Claude quite a bit as I was writing, and I found Claude to have the most human-sounding outputs. I really enjoyed that. I felt like it was a good collaborator in the process. A lot of times, ChatGPT very much sounds like ChatGPT, and it doesn't take long to recognize the patterns. I also found that Claude seemed to be a little more straight and narrow. I didn't get as much in the way of hallucinations and things like that. So I could double check the stuff I was getting out of it and it was accurate. ChatGPT, at least in its iterations up until now, has tended to make stuff up more than what I've gotten out of Claude.
Yeah, I think Claude is a really capable product, a really capable model. And, I feel like in terms of competitors to ChatGPT, like Claude and the OpenAI models have been back and forth in terms of how capable they are. Claude actually came out with some of the features that ChatGPT now has way earlier. So, ChatGPT has the docs, feature called Canvas. Claude had
Project,
months and months ago, they had artifacts. So the artifacts were things that you could, do this exact same thing. But then Claude also had projects way before ChatGPT did. And so I think there's a lot to be said about Claude as a model. I had the paid subscription there, but I dropped my Claude subscription recently because I think that ChatGPT has come around to a point where things like the tone with which it writes is becoming more natural. And with the whole breadth of different models that you can use, you can pick the model that best fits the use case. So I'm still there.
I'm not sure I'm going to hang on to it for much longer, especially after that little O3 demo that we just saw a second ago. But I haven't quite given it up yet, but I can see that coming. I've found myself not using it as much as I did when I was writing.
Yeah, I think what kind of will make the decision for you if you're kind of deciding which one of these you want to explore, you don't have to pick one, right? You can use both. They're different tools that do different things. And so if they both play a role in your workflow, then great, use both. But what I say is that as these models develop, models are pretty much at parity, which means that they all have the same basic capabilities. You can get on the leaderboards and you can see, well, this would eat this one by a point and this specific benchmark, but the average user doesn't care about that. What really matters most is platform. And I think that when we're looking at things like Claude, ChatGPT, the Google ecosystem with Gemini, and then some of these other LLM models that pop up around it, it's the platform or the product that's built around the model. And it comes down to like a Apple versus PC conversation.
Yeah, well, we go with Apple on that, I think. I'm going to make some viewer or some listeners upset.
This is the AI creative podcast and not the AI programmers podcast. If you love Linux or whatever, go for it. But I'm fully sold into the Apple ecosystem.
I would also just add that as these models get better, what's really cool is there's free versions of the model. And when the new paid model comes out, oftentimes they sort of take some of those older models and add them to the free account. So the free account is still very capable. If you're just wanting to play around without having to spend money on ChatGPT and Claude, know that you can still use Claude without a paid model. One of the things I really love about AI for the people that I coach that don't have big budgets for monthly subscriptions is there's a lot you can do for free. Why don't we jump into one of our favorite categories, which is image generation. This is, for me, what really got me excited about AI in the first place. There are two different categories I think we might talk about here. One is kind of creating photography, stock photography, realistic looking stuff. And then the other one is design, where you have typography and different visual elements and all of that. And as the tools have matured, those things have really started to come together. Rob, why don't you tell us about your favorite image generation tools? What are you using these days?
Yeah, so because I'm a nerd and I like to play with and tinker with things, the one that I use the most is Stable Diffusion. Stable Diffusion is a suite of models. They're open weight models, so you can download them and run them on your own hardware. And because of that, like, you can train your own models, you can merge different models together to blend different aesthetics and strengths and weaknesses of them. And so, like, I've been able to fine tune a style to fit the types of images that I like to create, which are more photographic in nature, and do it all 100% free locally on my machine. Of course, it requires the hardware to run it. And so you got to have either a good GPU on a Windows box, which I'm just I'm a Mac user, but I also have a PC on which I run all the AI stuff because Macs are not as good for image generation. But then secondary to that, I think we're both leaning in this direction on this tool, but there's Ideogram, which, at first it was like, when image generators came onto the scene, none of them could do text, right? It was like, just notoriously bad for mangled text. And DALL-E 3 came out and it was like still mangled text, but almost legible. And it's like, oh, this is amazing. And then Ideogram came out and it was actually like 90% of the time usable text. I'm like, okay, this is actually a capable thing for producing a graphic design style things. Now, Ideogram has further developed their model. Their photographic style is great. Their design style is great. Their typographical style is great. All around, I think, I am more and more going to Ideogram, not only for the design stuff, but also for photo stuff too.
That's been my journey as well. For the longest time, MidJourney was my number one. You couldn't beat it. It did the best photographs and so on and so forth. I don't know what's happened, but here lately, it just seems like when I go to prompt photographs out of MidJourney, it does not follow my prompt very well. I've been gravitating more toward Ideogram, even for photographic stuff. Ideogram is so good at typography, design elements. It does decent 3D stuff, t-shirt design. Like, I've done some t-shirt design type stuff. I have found that out of Ideogram, I can oftentimes get a first draft of a logo that I have to do a lot of tweaking on, but saves me time and it saves me money. And then I also have clients, I work with a lot of churches that don't have a huge budget. I can use Ideogram to create a first draft logo that I tweak a little versus doing my normal process where I'm going to more or less build it from scratch. So I can't even believe I'm about to say this, but I have actually been tempted to drop my MidJourney account because I don't find myself going there as much. I also want to mention there is an open source app we've been using a lot called Flux, which also some are calling that the MidJourney killer, but you can use Flux for free locally, or you can run it through a bunch of different sites. It is pretty incredible as well. That's kind of where I'm at these days with image generation.
Yeah, Flux is definitely a capable model. And I think on the ideogram piece, it's worth mentioning that two things stood out to me. One is workflow, and that a lot of people think I need to type in a prompt, I need to get the exact thing that I want. And then if I don't, it's terrible and I can't use it. For ideation, coming up with ideas, just like, hey, I've got a concept that's maybe kind of in my head and I need to flesh it out and draw it out. Letting the model come up with some options around that idea will often get me unstuck. And creating the base pieces that we can use in different elements. So, for example, the podcast cover for this podcast, when we were designing it, we went to Ideogram. We kind of produced an abstract shape out of that. We produced like a logo type, and we went in, we vectorized them, we tweaked them in Illustrator, we threw them together and comped them into a final piece. But that would have taken so much time to think of, to like, I never would have thought of doing what we did without that tool. Using it in a workflow and taking the components as pieces in your creative workflow, I think is something that is often overlooked. But then on the MidJourney side, I fully agree with you. I feel like MidJourney has historically like been the king, and it's kind of slipping. And I also want to add that I'm optimistic for two reasons. One, in the past month or two, they added a lot of new ways to influence style. Like a long time ago, they added personalization, which you could go through and click all the different images that you liked, and it would kind of fine tune the model for your preferences. But I found it to be really heavy handed and actually made it harder to get what I wanted to. But now they've got what's called mood boards, and you can take a dozen images, I think up to 100 images, throw in a mood board, and then it will fine tune the model to that style. And so you can mix and match. You can find other people's mood boards, if they share them and use them. So like I've got a Polaroid mood board where I just download a bunch of Polaroid photos, threw them in the mood board, and then without any additional prompting, I can get that exact style. And so I found that to be really helpful in getting back, coming back from where I think MidJourney drifted off to into something more usable. And the second thing is that MidJourney version 7 has been baking for a while, and it could imminently drop at any point. Let's let this play, take a little break. When we come back, we're going to dive into some more multimedia models like music, sound effects, speech, and video. So we'll be right back with you. Today's episode is brought to you by Magi. Tired of juggling multiple AI subscriptions and losing track of your content? Meet Magi, your all-in-one AI suite. Imagine having ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, and every other AI powerhouse under one roof for the cost of a single ChatGPT Plus subscription. Create separate workspaces for your various projects, teams, or departments, and save your favorite prompts for recurring tasks. For visuals, Magi's got you covered with the top generation tools like DALL-E 3, Flux, Leonardo, and Stable Diffusion. Best part, it's all just $19 a month. Visit AIcreativepodcast.com/Magi, that's MAGAI, today and revolutionize your content creation. Magi, all the AI tools you need wrapped in one package. Use code AI Creative, that's AI Creative, one word, for a special 30% discount off your first 3 months. All right, we are back from our break. And Jason, I am really eager to dive into this next category because as a musician, this has been something really fun for me to play with. And like a lot of AI models, they're fun. They start off as fun toys. It doesn't have a lot of practical purposes, but I found that using some of these tools, I've been able to produce actual usable stuff that I've used in real world pieces. And that's the world of music generation. So there's a bunch of different options out there. I want to hear from you because we have differing opinions on this one. What is your favorite music generator? What does it do for you, and why do you like it so much?
Yeah, absolutely. I used to call this party trick AI because it was kind of fun to get people in a room and say, hey, give me whatever, and I'll tell a story, and I turn it into a song. We did that at Christmas last year and just had everybody rolling because we were making songs with the technology. I started off, I think like you did, with Suno. When Suno came around, it was incredible that you could put in any subject, any style. It would either make up lyrics for you or you could make up your own lyrics. And that was my favorite one. But I quickly gravitated toward Udio when it came around. What I love about Udio is that the music sounds so like the samples are so realistic and the voices sound very human. It actually creates some real earworms. I mean, some of the songs are so good that I actually listen to them from time to time. So it definitely is still the king for me. One feature, and I don't remember if they got there before Suno got there, but they will allow you to upload a piece of music as reference, and you can extend that music, or you can create a little preamble to the part of the music that you've uploaded. That has served me well on projects. I've even been able to create original songs where I sang a tune, gave it to the model, and it kind of continued that, and I was able to put in lyrics and those kind of things. I still have subscriptions to both, but Udio is still my favorite music generator.
Yeah, I think this one comes down to the same Apple PC conversation too. You learn how to use a tool, get used to it and its quirks, and you stick with it. For me, that's been my experience with Suno. It's another music generator. Feature-wise, they're very similar, but then ultimately, like, there's going to be some subtle differences in the model. I think there's a lot more gap between models at this point because it's not as mature a space. Some of the things that I really appreciate about Suno are probably the same things that are in Udio, but
One of those two.
I just haven't gotten to explore Udio enough because I've been happy with Suno. Things like you mentioned, audio uploads. As a musician, one thing that I've been finding really interesting is that, I was getting ready for church one morning and I had a little bass riff going on in my head. I'm like, I want to flesh this out real quick before I run out the door. I'm literally trying to get the kids out the door. I grabbed my acoustic bass, set my phone on my desk, and I just bebop a little bass riff out, and then threw it in Suno. Told it, write me a song about going to church, and man, it blew my mind because the way that it maintained the overall tone of what I put into it. Like, here's my thing. If you were to not use that feature and just use Suno, I'd be like, this is trash. It all sounds the same. It's horrible. The lyrics are terrible. The music sounds like generic pop watered down. But when that model took what I put into it and maintained the tone, it was like insane. And we'll drop this one on Instagram too at AI Creative Podcast to hear it, because since then I've done so many. I play mandolin, so I did a little mandolin riff, and it came up with an entire mandolin instrumental. I play guitar, so I threw in the guitar lick with some strumming, and I did an entire guitar instrumental. And it just keeps the whole vibe, the creative potential of these things, if you use them for what they can do, is absolutely mind blowing.
Yeah, I just had a project. Someone was winning the equivalent of a Lifetime Achievement Award, and they hired me to do a little intro video. And the song that was in my head, I just could not get it out of my head, was the song from Back to the Future 2's Biff Tannen Museum. The music was in the background for this video, and it was just perfect for this kind of tongue-in-cheek thing they wanted to do. And of course, we couldn't afford to license that track. So I brought it in. I extended it a couple times. I did some pre-sections to it. It was only the real song, which is called Fanfare to Achievement, is only 30 seconds, but I was able to make a 1.5-minute long piece that had the exact same instrumentation. It maybe shared a few notes, but it was all original, but it captured the exact vibe. One other fun little project was that I was on a radio show to talk about my AI book. And when I got onto the show, they were talking about jingles and how they encouraged their listeners to send in jingles. So they started their show with a jingle. And I said, I can make you a jingle with AI. And they said, really? You can do that? And I said, yeah, give me a minute. So I quickly took their radio show, wrote some lyrics, ran that. By the end of the show, I was able to play for them their jingle, which I think they may be using now.
I think it's worth bringing up here and pausing for just a moment. We're going to flesh this idea out in a future episode, but the idea of what are the limits of what we can do and what we should do with these tools. And I'm sure that as a listener was kind of going through that, it's like, oh man, there's copyrighted stuff, copyright infringement, all this other stuff. And I think it's really important to note that using these tools responsibly, you need to be thinking through, like, where is this thing going to be played? Like, is this commercial? Is this not commercial? At the end of the day, commercial or non-commercial, copyright infringement is copyright infringement. But what we're creating is something entirely new. So there's no infringement here. We're going to dive into copyright so deep coming up. But I think it's worth bringing up acknowledging that somebody's probably thinking of that. What's your thinking when you're saying, hey, I want to create something that has this vibe? Where does that fit in the whole world of using AI for you?
I appreciate that you brought that up. For that piece that I was referencing, it was relatively small gathering, private. It's not uploaded to the internet. It was appropriate for that setting. I probably wouldn't do it in a commercial or, something that was going to run all over the place. But we always have to filter our use of AI through those ethical frameworks and think about how we're doing this the right way. Let's talk about sound effects, another form of AI generation that you and I both have used.
Yeah. So you mentioned earlier that there's some stuff that came before Suno. One of those things was stable audio. That was the first mainstream, I can go and type something and get a sound effect out of it. And it was okay. But then, it was still obviously AI. Like, you could hear the glitchiness, and it just wasn't good quality. The service that we use for multiple things that we're going to talk about here in a second too on speech. 11 Labs has a sound effects model that I've used routinely in the past year or so since it came out in actual production pieces. I mentioned the short film that I entered into a competition a while back. All of the sound effects on that were generated with 11 Labs. And it's like anything that you can dream of, for the most part, as long as it's something that exists, the model can make it. And so things like crashing waves, birds calling, a rock being set down and crunching on another rock, footsteps, like all these things that ordinarily you'd have to go into a studio and do Foley for, all of it's like stuff that we can produce just with a text prompt. So it's been a really interesting creative tool for me. How about you?
Yeah, it's my go-to as well. I had a little AI video I did just for fun the day that TikTok, the day that TikTok was about to shut down. And so I made this little joke of a video with somebody covering the TikTok sign with a Spirit Halloween banner. And I wanted the sound of a backing up bucket truck and some other ambience, and threw it in. I did something the other day with the Gulf of Mexico, and I had the sound of some horns on cargo ships, that rather than having to go to free sound and just look around or go to some library and spend forever trying to find the right thing, you can generate it very quickly. I've used it for ambient background noise and videos. It's incredible. So definitely a big fan.
And I think it's worth mentioning too, like go into Freesound or whatever free sound effects library you want to go to, and just like, man, how many hours have you wasted just going through and clicking and clicking and clicking and clicking and clicking, and none of it's exactly what you're going for. I think that it's worth mentioning that one of the ways that I've used Suno the most has been in that vein. It's not to create a song, but to create a score for a short film or a bumper for a piece. You might have to run it a few times, but I think you can save hours of digging to find the right thing just by generating it with it.
I had a pastor that I was working with last summer who was telling the story of she was a pastor in Arizona, and she was in court when some immigrants were brought in, and she was talking about the sound they were chained together at their ankles. And she was talking about the sound of the chains on the floor dragging. And I did spend a minute looking, and I just couldn't find anything. Then I went to 11 Labs. I described what I wanted. Perfect sounds. I shared it with her. She's like, "How'd you get that sound?" I'm like, "I got it from AI." And she was like, "That sounds just like what it was like in that room." Because it had a little bit of echo. I described it was in a courtroom and all that. What a time to be alive, as you said. This is the worst it'll ever be. It's incredible.
Which is kind of terrifying when you think about it. But also, right, the opportunities are endless. Let's talk about some more opportunities and a different type of tool. But I think we're going to stay on the same tool, if I'm correct here.
Yes.
And that's speech. So speech generation. When I think text to speech, I've always thought like, the Mac, text to speech models is like, "Hello, I am a text to speech model," or maybe like Siri, which is still like very generated. But man, it's possible now to generate full voiceovers and just about any voice you want, that unless your ear was finely tuned to hear what's going on, you would never know that it was AI generated. What tool do you use for that?
There is only one that's worth considering right now. 11 Labs is definitely my go-to. What I love about it is there's a bunch of different ways that you can use it. One of the ways that's really wild and so helpful is that you can do voice cloning, which means that I can take a sample of audio and upload it, and it can learn how to communicate like that voice. Now, that's a double-edged sword, but I'll just share that I had a project a couple of years ago where I asked my wife to do the voiceover for an organization that was presenting its vision for the year. And they didn't have a huge budget, so I had my wife do the voiceover. The next year, they called and they're like, "Hey, we want to change this line and this line." I'm not an audio engineer. It's really hard to get the same sound, the temperature being different, the humidity in the room. If I set everything up, it's not going to sound the same. So my wife was finishing up a degree at the time, so just getting her in front of a mic was going to be tough. I cloned her voice from the first year that I did it, took that into 11 Labs, typed out the new lines, applied her voice to it. It was a spot-on match for the EQ of what I had before. I didn't have to bother her, and they were thrilled with the results. What a time to be alive, as you said. The time that it saved me, the hassle of setting everything up, trying to get on my wife's calendar, all that stuff. The cloning thing is one of my favorite features. But of course, they've got a bunch of really great voices built in that you can use as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had the same experience with a client I was working with. They had recorded a piece for social media, and I hadn't consulted with them at this point, but they read off their landing page for their newsletter, and it's like some landing page that has some bizarre URL. Like, no, we can't use that. We need to get a redirect and shorten it. Rather than reshoot the video, I just went into 11 Labs, cloned the voice, cut it in, threw an overlay over it so I could cover up the cut. And like when I played it back for him, he's like, I didn't say that. That's crazy. We mentioned cloning. We talked about the fact that you can type in a script and get voices. One of the things that I found really interesting, and I know we both use this frequently, is the speech-to-speech piece, where the use case here is, I just did this short film, and I try to generate a voiceover, and like this, just the way that it's read, it just doesn't really match the tone I want to produce. There's no amount of prompting that's going to change what goes into the model unless you prompt it with your voice. And so with the speech-to-speech feature, you can record a performance and then overlay the voice onto your vocal performance. And so it takes all your cadence and inflection and puts the new voice on it. We'll throw this on Instagram. We'll do a demo of a piece I did where I'm talking, and then next thing you know, I'm speaking with the epic movie voice. And then next thing you know, I'm a valley girl. And then next thing you know, I'm speaking Japanese. Watashi wa Nihongo benkyou shimashita. Demo, I still don't remember most of my Japanese, so I was speaking English and it dubbed it over. Just, man, the possibilities here are endless. How have you used the speech-to-speech feature?
Well, I've used it much in the same way that you have used it. I just mentioned the Lifetime Achievement Award thing that we gave a guy, and I don't have a great voice for that, but I was able to, ladies and gentlemen, tonight we want to, whatever. And I recorded it with all the right inflection and then used an AI voice to take that to the next level. In another episode, we're going to talk about my book, AI in the Church, which you wrote one of the forewords for. And I did a whole trailer for that where I took the greatest leaders in the church of all time and did little quotes. And I was able to do all the voiceover myself in British accents and a French accent, and then use AI to change my voice. What I really love about this particular tool is now that you can do voice to voice, you can capture the emotion you're after. That's what was missing, as you said, whenever you type it in. AI doesn't really understand. It gets close every now and then. What I would do in the past was generate 5 or 6 different takes and then cut all the lines up, trying to get the best read of this sentence that captured the emotion of it. Now you can be quiet, you can be louder, and you can get excited, and it takes all of that and just applies the new voice to it. Of course, there's a downside to that too. Back in the primaries in New Hampshire, someone cloned Biden's voice and did a robocall to all the Democrats and said, "Stay home, save your vote for the election." And our mutual friend, Kenny Jang, I heard him say one time in a training he was leading that we might need to think about a safe word, because you could clone someone's voice and call their kid and say, "Hey, I need you to Venmo me $25. I'm at the gas station. I left my phone and my wallet at home, and someone let me borrow their phone. Text Venmo this amount to this person." If you don't have a safe word, they might believe that is actually true because it's that good now.
Yeah, it is, like, you would never tell. And I think that brings up just the thing we need to hammer home all the time. With great power comes great responsibility. I hear and empathize with all the folks that are like, this is going to completely destroy the world because people can do all these nefarious things. And more and more, we're going to have safeguards to put some guardrails on that. But between now and then, as this technology matures, people are going to get duped. I think that part of what we do is we educate and put this stuff out there to show people how convincing and powerful this stuff can be, whether it's images or video or sound, so they can start to have that little AI detector perk up. Because, man, there's so many like AI generated images that fly around Facebook that are just so obviously AI. My friends who are a bit more aged and wise than I am haven't encountered these images, and they're like, "Oh, that's so beautiful. That child made this ginormous sculpture out of tin cans." No, that's not real. And so, yeah, man, it's just like so much potential, but then also we need some guardrails around there.
Yeah, and image it's been getting better and better for a while, it was pretty easy to tell when something was AI, and now it's harder to tell. And that's starting to happen with video. So we should talk about video generators as well, because those tools are getting to be so good. I mean, you just got honorable mention for something that you didn't shoot, but you used images and generative video to create a whole story. What tools are you using? What's your favorite? What's your go-to these days?
Yeah, and by no means are these tools perfect. The short film that I produced had, I think, 39 total shots in the 2.5 minutes of the runtime. I generated over 1,060 clips in order to produce those 35 shots. Even when I'm shooting photo, I'll shoot a bazillion photos, cull down to 10%, and then keep 10% of that. It's really no different than traditional media, except for when we're shooting video, you're not going to shoot something 1,000 times and cull it down. You're going to want to get it right on the get-go. There's a lot of progress to be made when it comes to video. Even my preferred tools here that I've decided that I enjoy, this is a space that is like moving so quickly, and models are like leapfrogging each other, that it's hard to pick one. But I will say that the one that I used to produce that short film was Sora, OpenAI's new video model, dropped at the end of December. It's intriguing because it has some tools built into it that others don't, that make it easier to produce video. One of the things that you'll if you start to generate any video, it'll be like 2 seconds of great footage, and then it goes off the rail and deforms and it looks terrible. With Sora, you can trim that and regenerate only the bad part from the good part, so that you can start to fix some of that, or even a section in the middle of it, cut that out, and then connect the dots. Tools like that make it easier to actually produce stuff worthwhile. Also, if you have the Pro plan on Sora, you can generate at 1080p, which is slow and takes a ton of credits, but you've got an unlimited plan on the relaxed mode. I think I worked it out that you get, I think, going from memory, 10,000 credits with your subscription on the Pro mode, and that's like, works out to be like 5 clips of 1080p video. It's like nothing. I worked it out that if I were using all of the credits and did not have that unlimited mode, it would be like 185,000 credits to produce the short film that I did, which is like thousands of dollars worth of usage. So having that unlimited mode there is helpful, and having those tools there are helpful. My runner-up is Runway ML. They've got a video model called Gen 3 and Gen 3 Alpha, which before Sora was the one I was using the most. It's still not even the best. There's stuff that's leapfrogged it already. But again, having that unlimited plan that I have, if you're going to produce anything of substance, that's essential. So those are my picks. What have you been using? What are some of the other ones out there that are getting really good too?
Runway is definitely my go-to, but I'm also on that unlimited plan. It's probably the biggest budget item that I spent on AI this year. You really need it, because when I was on a higher tier plan, you couldn't generate much without running out of credits. It does take a little while because it puts you in a queue, and after you can generate 3 clips at a time on their turbo mode, and that takes a little while. And then they've got an alpha mode that it takes a little longer, but the coherence is a little bit better. I will typically start there, but then there's another tool that tends to understand what I'm after better. There is no, like you mentioned a moment ago, there's no one go-to tool, because you can run the same thing in 2 tools, and one time it'll work with a tool and the next time it doesn't, and vice versa with another tool. But Kling AI is one of my favorite tools. One of the things I like about the new Kling, there's a new feature on Kling, it will let you do lip sync off the bat. So I can bring in a video, I can bring in an audio file, and it'll move the lips so that if I want the character to talk, I can do that. Now, Runway has something very similar, but you have to generate the video first in Runway, or use something called Act 1, where you mimic what you want on camera, and then it'll drive the facial movement. There's also another feature that's pretty cool that they just added called Elements, and my first test was taking Rob, myself, a sombrero, and a roller coaster, and it generated a video of the 2 of us riding a roller coaster with you wearing a sombrero. So there are new ways to interact with the video. We both have been exploring and playing with Hunyun's video model, which is an open source model. What's really cool about that is you can train it on your own likeness, so that you can generate with text an image of you doing something specific. So I like that. And then Just an honorable mention is an app called Minimax, which is a Chinese model. I haven't done the paid plan on that, but my experiments with the free plan, which you can generate a few things every day, it sometimes gets it when the other models don't. So this is moving fast and constantly moving. And so it's hard to say this is the one to go to. So I find that I need to have all of them. Oh, one other honorable mention is that I have a subscription to Krea, Krea.ai. Krea actually has all these models built in. So you don't have to have plans with everybody. It charges you against your credits on that account, but you can try all of them included in the plan that you already have. So I played with a few that I own. List two there.
I was just about to bring up that if you're going to explore video, particularly if you want to try some models and not go all in, I kicked myself for going with a yearly plan on Runway because like when it first dropped, they first dropped Gen 3, it's like, this is the best that's out there. But then like 2 weeks later, it's no longer the best that's out there and other things have gotten better. And then just like ever since then, it's just been like boom, 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 model after model coming out and new feature after new feature and things like the Elements feature. Like that's absolutely clutch for composability and having, consistent characters and things like that. And you mentioned Krea. Another one that I use is fal.ai, which is another site where you load it up with credits and run any model you want to. And so whether that's image models, LLMs, video, audio, all these other things, but using one of those, I think would be the way to go, particularly if you're just dabbling. If you want to go all in, I wouldn't get an annual subscription anywhere right now because things are moving so quickly.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Although I'm really tempted when Google's VO comes out to want to subscribe to it too. But I think you're right. And you turned me on to FAL as well. And I have been burning through credits over there, but it's pretty inexpensive. I mean, you can do a lot for not very much money.
Yeah. This has been a whirlwind. This has been a ton of talk about a ton of different tools. We're going to drop everything in the show notes with all the links and things like that, so you don't have to remember all these things. We're going to link out to all of the different pieces that we mentioned here. I just want to say, I think the theme of this episode is that new tools drop every single day. Features evolve, models get better, some models take the lead over others, but ultimately, like what it comes down to isn't necessarily the tool, it's the workflow, right? As long as you're using a variety of tools in your toolbox, how you arrange them is really where you're going to get your results. And knowing like the strengths and weaknesses of different tools, using them for their strengths, avoiding their weaknesses, and creating like creative assets for a broader project. None of these things are like one-click magic bullets. So learn the tools, experiment with the tools, kind of feel out their strengths and weaknesses, and then find what works for your workflow and the stuff that you actually want to create. Whether that's for fun or whether that's for work and you're producing stuff for clients or your job.
Thanks for tuning in to Fuse, the AI Creative Podcast. If you enjoyed today's show, it would mean a lot to us if you'd smash that subscribe button, leave a review, and share this episode with a friend. If you'd like to connect with us or follow along with projects we're working on, find us on Instagram at AI Creative Podcast or at aicreativepodcast.com.